The Senate has passed a bill that would allow states to generate power.
The bill for an act to repeal the Electric Power Sector Reform Act was passed after the consideration of a report of the Committee on Power on the Electricity Bill. Chairman of the committee, Senator Gabriel Suswam, said the bill will provide an ideal legal and institutional framework to leverage the modest gains of the privatization phase of the electricity sector in Nigeria. The Senate notes that the sector is faced with myriad of post-privatization challenges, including heavy debts, which needs the federal government's intervention.
Mr. President, this one deals with situation where state, in the bill now, state can legally generate power, transmit and distribute without any hindrance. Any individual who have the capacity can do same. That is a new introduction in the bill. It has now opened up so that any individual who have the capacity can go and generate power, transmit it and distribute it if we have the capacity to engage in transmission and distribution. That has been introduced now, and so Nigerians are free to go into investment.
We're taken over by some banks that this discourse owed so much money. That changes the landscape, because banks, or let me say those banks, do not have the capacity, the wherewithal to run the discourse. What happens with our discourse now in the hands of banks? Are they going to privatize them again, or government should look into it and do the privatization once again?
President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan. Well, to discuss the lingering issues in the power sector and the way forward, we're joined by RISE analyst Dr. Sam Amadi. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's begin with this seemingly exciting news. Let me just say seemingly. The electricity bill that's just been passed. How much of a game changer, really, will this be?
Not much.
Oh.
Not much at all. Again, see, it's one of those Nigerian idea of legalizing what I call legal fetishism. All the time you think the answer to a problem is usually new laws or more stringent law. Again, misunderstanding. States, individuals can actually, as it's now without this law, play key role in this sector. Oftentimes, how people talk about why can't states play in this sector? States do play. The difference is this. For example, Lagos State government, when I was NEC chairman, I licensed them. Kwaibom has a power plant. Edo and Azura Power had a combination. And so you can see that Rivers had the one he sold to the Sahara Energy and so on and so forth. So the problem is not that they can't play. The problem is that the electricity market is designed in a manner that viability, financial viability, and so the instrument for entry, SPV, business entities, not just government, because the notion of reform is, bottom line, is takeoff is that you take off public monopoly. And so if government wants to play, it plays as a business entity, just like I have NNPC Limited now. Right. So it's not like a big game changer here. Again, if you talk in terms of capacity to generate, when I was chairman, we had the embedded generation regulation and the independent distribution regulation, independent transmission, which says that you can actually have a private grid if you can show that the existing network provider cannot meet the need. Right. So the notion here is that you see the inefficiency, the efficiency, the sunk cost, and the economics, even the technicalities of electricity distribution is not something like plug and play. So the notion that individuals, think in terms of the financial outlay required, and even the debt. We were doubtful if a serious Nigerian company, except the big ones like Dangote's, who can even actually play this market. So yes, in a sense, we are moving. The idea is that they have removed any possible legal obstacle to full public or private or even individual play. But the essential problem of policy, of regulation, of even creating a market that is sensible and profitable and therefore, receive funding is not solved by this regulation.
All right, so very quickly, let's talk about this greed. What is it that makes this greed collapse so much? If this was a human being collapsing
That many times?
You have come back to life like 100 times.
Why do we keep having these issues?
Why?
Why is it collapsing? And I mean, are there any guarantees that if it recovers this time around, it won't collapse again?
Oh, it's going to keep collapsing. By the way, some estimates say about 18 grid collapse this year. So we don't even know how many has collapsed. And depending on what you call collapse, the total partial collapse. Now, why are we collapsing? Somebody would ask. Basically because the system collapse is a reflection of two factors. One is that there are so much structural frailty in this industry. Whether it's transmission, where your transmission network is weak, frail, and not loped enough, and so some small disturbance, something goes off. Whether it's in distribution, where maybe they're not able to pick load, so they can send frequency disturbance across the value chain. But again, the other reason is there's a slack in project management in this market. So the solution will be both long-term and short-term. In the short term, you need to create a high sense of urgency and diligence so that even as our market needs fundamental reform, even as we don't have the financing to expand, but at least we can have the attention to execute properly and manage, respond to this. So for example, a small rain comes, okay, and systems fail. You need to respond quick and fix them so that they don't constitute a problem. So the lack of efficient project management, the level of lack of diligence and slackness means that we're having more collapses than we could afford. But essentially, the weakness that's structural means that once in a while there'll still be a collapse.
Okay, so will solutions, this restructuring of 5 discos that we hear, albeit temporary, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, Kano, Kaduna, Benin discos will be restructured. Though federal government says it will be temporary. How will this, contribute in solving the problem?
It could,
in a sustainable way.
Yeah, it could help with dealing with the financial crisis. There are 2 levels of crisis: the financing, okay, they're owing money they can't pay. So if the banks can put in a good board and pay themselves. But the operational failure, inefficiency, is not cured by stepping right and taking over. It's cured by the time that's the taking over results in an improved management, able to run the system more efficiently. And then of course, an uptick in regulation and policy. So the fact that you have taken over AEDC or taken over a battle it is a financial takeover. Is the stakeholders taking over because the investor couldn't perform. But would that automatically translate into improvement in operations? Maybe, maybe not. In fact, in some perverse incentive might be for these guys to focus more on recovery. And except the regulator pushes them and keep vigilance. The behavior of entities that are stepping in to recover is that they first focus on recovery rather than improving services.
We can only hope that a time will come we don't have to talk about these issues all over and over again. But we have to thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise News analyst, for joining us on the news tonight.